Would you like to do multicolor prints on different layers and your firmware doesn't support the filament change command? Here's the technique I use to get around that. I'm going to show how to do sort of a manual break apart of a sliced G-code to do multicolor filament. We're going to do a manual filament swap in there. I'm going to show both Prusa and Cura, but I generally use PrusaSlicer, and it actually makes it's actually a little easier to do here, but I will show both and print both and see the results. So I just threw together a simple little thing here with a so it's got I'm going to do kind of a single color here for the base of this little coin. There's some text here that's at a certain raised level, and then some that's a little bit higher. So that's what I'm going to do with the 3 color here. So it's going to be 1 color here, another for these letters here, and then up here. And then this little guy I tend to throw on sort of to act as a white bucket, purge bucket, whatever you want to call it. Just when I'm originally starting with the second and third color, I have it do a prime line on the side over here, and I just like having it need to print a little bit something close over here to the print, since it can't do the skirt anymore. So just to give it a little something to get the filament flowing over here close to the actual print. That's kind of up to you whether you want to do that or not. I have gone ahead and sliced this, and what we can do in the preview is come down and start seeing where I'm doing the color change. And what I'm doing here is at 1 millimeter is this top of this coin. I actually enabled ironing on here just for giggles. So now we can really see clearly that so it irons everywhere except where there's going to be higher layers on here. So 1.0 millimeters is where the first color change is going to happen, and then I can kind of come up and see. I believe it's here at 1.4 is actually where, no, it's not. It's going to be right here is 1.6. So we trace this back. It's going to do that little purge, fill over there, and then only do those layers right there. So 1.6 is my change to the top third color here. So that's information we need. Cura is going to be a little bit different. You need to know the number of the layer, whereas Prusa really just needs to know the actual height in millimeters. So you'll see that in a second. So that's that. I've saved that file out. And so what I normally do is, so I saved the full G-code, both from Cura and Prusa, and I make 3 copies. So I like to keep my original around. I open in a text editor, and let me try to blow the font size up here. And again, I'm going to work in PrusaSlicer a little bit first here to get going, because I find it a little bit easier for me. So we got these image previews. You don't need to understand a whole ton about the G-code, because it puts comments in for you to see. And some of this comes in from my start G-code, as I have some comments or commands that if the printer firmware knows how to do it, knows the prime line is going on here. And you'll see here layer change there in the Prusa G-code. It's very clear to know this is where layer the first layer 0.2 millimeters is starting. So it tells the height all very nice and clear. So I want all of this to be in the first Gcode file. So now it's a matter of finding where do I want to stop. Well, I wanted to stop at after it lays down layer 1.1. So I'm going to search for layer, the comment layer there. So there's 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, 1, and then here's where I want to stop. Now, I don't want anything from here. Now, I can't just delete everything else in the file because so at the very end of your Gcode file is a bunch of parameters of what it used to build. So all your essentially profile sort of stuff. But at the end, it has type custom. So here's my filament and Gcode, which I don't really have. So everything after that is the machine and Gcode. Now, I have to decide what do I want to do there, because I could have it do what it normally does, which is move the head up and then turn off the heater for the hot end and the bed. Now, what I usually choose to do here is to not do that. So I wanted to move the head up so that I can swap the filament, but I want to keep the bed hot so nothing slides off the bed, although I do have PEI sheets, so it's not really a huge risk there, but I usually delete that. So everything right before the custom would have to do with that, the other layers. Okay, so then I need to scroll back and find where did I leave the comments, where did I find that one layer. So I'm going to come back and find the, sometimes I'll leave a funny character in there so I can easier find where I was. So there we are. So I wanted to delete layers 1.2 and higher. So I will scroll down to where we get to the custom code, which is right there. So I want to delete everything there. That's those intermediate layers that I don't want. Now I could very well just let the normal Gcode and Gcode work, which for me is to do a little retraction, move the Z up, move the head all the way back, the bed up. So I could do that, but what I'm going to do is take off the cooling of the heat bed and the extruder, or the hot end. So that way it doesn't cool down, because I'm going to be sitting here watching it, and then I'll swap the filament and start the next print. So that is what I would do for the first layer. Now for the second layer, I can do my same find. So I want to keep the prime line, but I don't want it to go and do the skirt at all, any of that. And one thing I should have actually mentioned here as I was talking about this is, as you're laying your objects on your bed, you need to remember where your prime line is going to be, and that for me is on the left here. You also, if you're going to have a bunch of objects on your plate, you need to bear in mind if you're doing a prime line for the additional layers, where your hot end fan or anything in your hot end assembly is going to be low. So if that's coming along here for your prime line, you don't want any objects over here, because your whole hot end assembly is going to be moving back here. And if you have a taller object here that you're printing higher levels, you're going to bang into those. And also, as you go from filament to filament, you want to pull up that prime line, unless you really get fancy with your Gcode and move them to different areas. So I should have mentioned that. That's kind of important. But now I have found in here where my 0.2 layer is. So I want to skip everything from 0.2 to 1. That was for this exercise, my little coin here. So I want to print only 1.2 and higher. So I can come up here, scroll back up to the top where I left that gap in there. You can put comments, anything, whatever it takes to make it easy to go find where you were. I will delete that. And now it's a matter of coming down and finding how far do I want to go with this second color. And for this exercise, I want to print layer 1.6, but nothing higher. So now I want to delete the 1.8 higher, scroll down to my end to where we get to the custom Gcode at the end. So all of that is for that third filament color that I want to be able to delete here. I will come and delete the turning off the hot end. And that's it for the second file for my second color. So for the third, a little bit easier. I'm going to keep the same stuff for the prime line, and where it would come down to doing the layer here. I don't want that. So now I can remove everything until I get to the 1.8 layer that would be in my third color here. So I can delete all of this, because all I want to do is the priming, and then it will jump right back up to the level where I need it to do that third color. I don't need to do anything with the end Gcode, because this time when it gets to the end, I do want it to cool off the bed and the hot end, and I can be completely done. So that is what I would need to do for the Prusa files. So now I can take these three, put them on my SD card, run them in sequence, and I will do that here shortly. Okay, so as we look at how Cura does things here to be able to do a break of the Gcode, I discovered the hard way that you need to set relative extrusion to true. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with relative and absolute extrusion, but let me show why that is and how it matters. So right here I have left and right. On the left here should be the relative extrusion. You can see in the Gcode how when I check that box, it put that in there. On the right here, this is the default absolute. So if you don't check that box, that's what it's going to do. It's going to leave in the absolute extrusion mode. So what does that mean? All right, so it's a matter of telling the extruder for absolute, well, at this point you should have this much out, and now you should be here and here. So the idea of on a trip is, you know, by stop 3 you ought to be 25 miles down the road, but over here in the relative mode, it's just saying for this individual move, this is how much you should extrude. So by stop 1, you should be at 5 miles down the road. At stop 2, you know, we're going to drive 2 more miles, and whatever. So this is in, you know, the miles between each stop on your road trip. Over here, it's just the odometer at each stop in your point. So you can see how the numbers over here in absolute mode are growing, and over on the left for the relative, it's just very tiny extrusions for each movement. And that may not seem like it's a big deal, but until you get down and you start breaking the Gcode apart over here for another layer here, I can just cut that code and it will just say, well, what I'm doing this move, put out this much filament and carry on. Well, over here, that's a big number. And so what I found the hard way was breaking that all apart, that when it went to do the first move for the next color sort of thing, it tried to extrude a whole ton of filament to get caught up because all of the previous moves here were deleted out of the file. So I hope that didn't confuse you, but the important thing to note is if you're going to be breaking this code apart, you need to be having the relative settings here and not absolute, and you can do that through that checkbox. I'll go back and show you. Now, why did this actually work for the Prusa side without needing to do that? And Prusa does have a setting to go to relative mode. So I'll show you that real quickly here. So there is no M83 here for relative extrusion, but what it is doing, so it's keeping it in absolute absolute mode here, but at each layer it's doing a reset of the extruder. So you can see here as it begins, now it keeps growing for that layer, but when we go to the next layer, it's going to do a reset of the extruder. And so we begin back at 0, and then the numbers grow until we get to the next layer, and it does a reset and again begins at 0 and increases through that layer. So that's why you can pull a set of layers out of the Prusa G-code without a problem, but when it comes to Cura, it does not do that for you, and there's no way to just add a reset in there because the numbers are increasing greatly as you go down through the layers. So again, that's the relative extrusion checkbox. It's going to warn you, so I don't know what printers do support this, but it's working fine here for me. So now let me go ahead and take a look at this model and show you how to break that apart into different pieces. Okay, so I took my quick little design here and I threw it upside down onto the plate here so I can make sure I know this is the one done here in Cura. And again, I have the relative extrusion checked there. And what I want to do now is look at the preview, and I will admit I am not very skilled here with Cura. I tend to use Prusa, but I wanted to see how this would work for everyone here in Cura as well. So coming down to layer 5, Cura does this, talks about the layer numbers, not the actual millimeter height. So I want 5 layers here in that first color. Then it's going to start doing some lettering, and what I need to do is figure out at what point it goes for where I want the third color to start. And so this is still all what I want to be that second color. And I believe layer 8 is where I'm going to have just that middle word. And so only the third color there. So that's my goal. So I want to print the first 5 in first color, print 6 and 7 in the second color, and then 8, 9, and I believe it goes to layer 10. Those are going to be in my third color. So that's what I'm after there. All right, so what I have done is made 3 copies of the Cura G-code file here. And what I need to do is strip out the portions that we don't want. So in the first one here, we want to skip everything from layer 6 and up for my little demo. So I will, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I want to print 5. When I come down to 6, everything below here can go. So anything after that is not really needed. So I can come down to the end. And now with Cura, it's hard to tell exactly where the actual work ends, but I've sort of figured it out. This time elapsed is the end of the last layer there. I know this is a retraction at the very end, and then this is my end G-code that I see here, and I have code in there to turn off the heater, and it's also Cura is adding its own in there, so I'm going to delete that. Here's the heat bed and the hot end, and there's another one down here. So I'm going to delete all of that so the hot end stays hot, the bed stays hot while I do the filament swap. So that one's easy. Now what I found, this took a couple tries to work out, but where does the layer stuff break for the next one? So this is easy right here. This is where my first layer, although it's called layer 0, but that's where the first layer starts. Great, that's easy. Now I want to print for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I want to begin at 6. Now, even though it says layer 6 begins here, there is up here, that is important to bring it up to the right Z value. So I need to keep that. So that's important. So I'm going to really hack the G-code and take out that movement there, and everything in here is really irrelevant because I don't need to do any X, Y motion in here. I just need to, after printing the prime line up there, to come up to the right height. So this is all that initial color that I don't want. So now I can jump up to the top where I got here, delete all of that. One thing I didn't point out in the first file is I do have the relative extrusion going on here, and that's why you can see extrusion numbers here very small for each movement here, so it's not jumping up to hundreds like it would be if you were in absolute mode. So this is critical. Found this by trial and error that is also critical. I want to print layer 7 and not 8 for this little example here, so I can delete all of this down to my end G-code and then turn off the commands that would turn off the heater so it stays hot. So there's the end of that final layer, so I can do a little retraction here at the end, turn off or disable the commands here that would be turning off the heaters, keep it hot, so I can do the filament swap. That should be good. And then here is, I can, for my third color, delete everything from layer 0 down to, I want to print layers 8, 9, and 10 for this little example, but I need that Z movement. So I will actually highlight that, delete these things in here, and again, I don't need any X and Y motion here, I just need the Z. So everything from the previous layers up here can now be deleted. So if you look at it, it's just the heat up, get hot, do my prime line, and then move up to the right height. So let me print those out and give it a try. And I think I actually went one level too high there. I got the black up there, so this is definitely not going for the best quality here. But anyway, that's not what we're really here to show. So print finished. Now if I hit confirm, and come into tool, extrusion, see it is still hot. So I can pull the filament out, pop a new one in. One thing I need to do is take this prime line off, because I want to lay down a new one of the next color, and then I can print the next file. So now that I have the next filament loaded, I'm going to go with my Prusa 2 file, confirm, maybe, and it should hopefully get started right away here, since everything should still be hot. It may kind of pause. It's starting right away, so it's going to lay down a new prime line. I'll pull that off before starting the third file. But if you watch, it should hopefully jump right in, but it's already saying 1.2, so it's already going up to the next level there. And it should be really quick because there's not a whole lot for it to do here. Just a little bit of text on there. Clearly, I did not spend a lot of time trying to dial this in at all, and while I'm thinking of it, this is a little trickier if you don't have all the same filament properties. So if you really wanted to mess with different temperatures for the filaments, that's pretty easy to do. But if you're going to need something like different retractions, something like that, it's going to be really difficult. So if you have like materials here, this actually works. Alright, so set 2 is done. So still hot, and I can use the controls here to eject the filament, do a change. Again, I miscalculated on that layer. Somehow I went one layer too high than it needed to. That's why that middle word there has a little bit more white on it, but it'll end up looking okay for what I'm doing. But it's a little trial and error. Just trying to show the process here. So I was rushing, trying to guess what layer that was, and obviously made a mistake. But let me flip the filament to the third color and see how that goes. Alright, so on to color 3 here. So again, it's already planning to jump up to 1.8. So it lays down that prime line. Go. So for a quick throwing together thing, aside from a couple of little mental mistakes, noting down the wrong layer heights. Quick and dirty 3-color print. So I will try the Cura version, see how I did on that. Alright, so my first set of layers there for the first color is done. We're done, and when I go into load the next filament, it is already nice and hot. So I can do that and kick off section number 2. Alright, so we've got the next filament loaded. Come and print section 2. And since it's already nice and hot, should get going right away. A little dribble on the way to the prime tower, white tower, whatever you want to call it. So I only did one layer of the, so I did get the layer count wrong for those, the top and bottom word there. I guess didn't check it well enough in the slicer, but again, just proving that it works. It works. So let me swap out for third filament here, so I can confirm that. Kept things nice and hot, so on to the next filament. and kick off part 3. That was just a little piece of filament pulling. I'm just using a tiny little scrap. So starting with that little white tower, prime tower, whatever you want to call it. So it just is able to pick up the next layer there. I think I didn't quite count the Cura layers correctly, but because I think it's showing when it showed 5 in the actual Gcode, it started at 0, so I should have gone down 1. So I think that's the mistake I made, but something you can practice with. So one more problem I wanted to point out and address. I don't know if you saw it in the videos. I was not really paying attention until I looked at it a little closer. The second and third filament prints had no parts fan running. So that was not intentional. And the reason it didn't happen is because, of course, the printer does what you tell it to do, not what you want it to do. This M106 is the Merlin command to set the parts fan speed. This 255 is a binary, so that's full speed. And so here, so starting with my second layer in my Prusa file, that's where the parts fan would turn on. In Cura, I don't know where I have the setting coming from, but for the second layer, it's actually a partial speed, 85. I'd have to do the math of what that is. Next layer, it's going to 170, and then so that's about half speed, I think. And then for the fourth layer is where the parts fan is on full power. So what I should have done was, after the prime line for the second and third filament Gcode files, I should have copied this in there to start right after the prime line. Once it moves up to the proper layer height for the that color filament, should turn the parts fan on to get better results. Obviously, depending on your filament, what you normally print with the parts fan. I normally have it full speed, starting with layer 2. So in a minute, I'll show some other prints that I did here with the color change thing with the fan on that I got a little bit better results. So sorry about that. Wanted to point it out. Hope that makes sense. If not, you can put it in comments and I can try to do something else to explain this a little bit better. All right, so in summary, here was the Prusa sliced little demonstration there. Here's the one that was in Cura, and I did go back and figure out that yes, Cura in the preview shows a layer number, but in the actual Gcode it starts with layer 0, whereas in the preview in the slicer it shows layer 1, so you just have to subtract 1. So instead of going from layer 1 to 10 in the actual Gcode, mine went from 0 to 9, so that's why I ended up with only with the layers being off there, but shows that the idea sort of works, and this was just not ironed or anything, and obviously using just filament scraps to get that done. I went back and did something to try to look a little bit better. Did that in PrusaSlicer. So that is the technique I use. It's not real hard, a little tricky, might take a little bit of trial and error, but I think once you look at the Gcode a little bit, it all starts to make sense what the commands are doing, and you can figure out how to do that and end up with your multicolor prints that way, even when your firmware doesn't support the usual filament change command. So I hope that is helpful, and feel free to comment, reach out if you have some challenges with that. Happy to help. Happy printing.